Social justice is the coffee that wakes me up ready to fight every single day of my life for something more for my family and for my community. It's why I choose to wake up every day and put on a suit that makes me feel hella uncomfortable. It's not because I make some big check at my humble nonprofit job. It's because I care. I care so much it eats me. I grew up in the heart of the South Valley in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My community recently gained notoriety because of this TV show called Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad showcased my neighborhood as turf that was up for claim by local drug dealers, where kids got shot riding their bikes in front of their homes. Stereotypes like that have always been hard for us to overcome, way before Breaking Bad ever came along. My neighborhood was nestled just below another neighborhood called the Colonia, which lacked basic infrastructure like running water, paved roads, and electricity. Third world conditions right in our backyard. But growing up, that wasn't abnormal. It was just the way things were. Like my community, my familia was also no stranger to struggle. My parents basically came from nothing but tortillas and fried papas. They both effortlessly carried around generations of systemic poverty and oppression without ever daring to blame anybody but themselves. They hated to be called victims, and they were taught at a young age that if they were to hustle and have hard work ethic, that they can overcome anything. A principle I ultimately grew up to believe was bullshit, because my dad was the most hardworking man I have ever met. He worked 2 jobs for 35 years, and he was still never able to earn a big enough paycheck to keep me and my brother and sister from being hungry and ultimately being homeless. My mother, like so many women, is a nurturer, a beautiful soul who cares so much about others that she always puts her own emotions, fears, and personal self on the back burner. She's like the little brown teapot that would warm up until it would whistle. When she was just a child, she was victimized by a family member in front of her siblings. True to what she was taught, she suppressed her trauma so far down she convinced herself it never happened. Buried under piles of secrets she was expected to burn, she eventually burned herself. And by the time I was 5 years old, my mother would pick up a drug addiction that would serve to mask her trauma for the next 15 years of her life. My mother's pain caused my pain, and her trauma caused my trauma, but you know what? I don't blame her. As I've grown older, I've come to learn that hurt people tend to hurt people. My mother never wanted to be a drug addict. She never wanted the guilt that came with some of the things that she had to do for a fix, guilt that to this day she is still trying to make amends for. My mother's been sober for 9 years, and she still has to carry around the guilt and the stigma that comes with the word addict. For me, my trauma manifested itself for me the worst when I was in schools. I loved learning, but since my parents weren't engaged in my education, the assumption always was that we just didn't care about learning, that there was something ingrained in our culture and our values that didn't allow us to care about education. That couldn't have been further from the truth, but I internalized those racial and cultural biases, and I allowed myself to believe that I just didn't belong in schools. So one day I was literally homeless, and I was living out of the trunk of my sister's car, and I thought maybe it would be easier if I just stopped showing up. My teachers were really out of touch with my reality. They thought that I was troubled, they thought that I didn't care. When they found out I was homeless, they often turned to policies and regulations that hurt me and my family more than they helped. They maybe had good hearts and they had good intentions, but good hearts and good intentions don't always equal the best policy. I didn't have the language to tell you how institutionalized racism and classism had to push me out of schools, but I knew what it felt like, and I knew that it happened far too often to kids like me. To seek comfort in my pain, I turned to creating art, and painting murals literally paved a pathway for me to get back into school, but it also helped me find community organizing. It was through community organizing that I learned about the cycles of systemic poverty, oppression, and trauma. I learned about the government, about how policy was created, and I learned that people like me could be a part of creating change if we were simply willing to share our stories, to get organized, and to move to action. Learning that changed my perspective about how I wanted to engage, because I didn't just want to see changes happen, I wanted to be a part of making those changes happen. And it became especially real for me when I became a mother. It became the tears that well up in my eyes when I look at my son. I knew that social justice was something that I had to commit to for the rest of my life. My son is 7 years old, and I so desperately want him to see a better world than I did. And not just for him, for all kids in my neighborhood. I also want the next generation to be able to grow up in the same neighborhood that I did and not have to overcome the same barriers and stigmas that me and my family had to overcome, the ones that Breaking Bad always portray us as. But I know that those things can't happen unless we get organized, unless we take action, and unless we're willing to fight for social justice. Because, like Ashata Shakur said, it is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains.